Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Den of Cin. I literally almost forgot the name of our podcast as I was making the introduction, but I remember it. It's Den of Cin with Devin and James. I am James, and with me is my co-host, the amazing Devin. How are you doing tonight, Devin?
I'm doing okay. It seems like I used to have a podcast. I just can't remember the name of it anymore. It's been so long. I've missed you, James. I really have missed you. And it's been a crazy few weeks for both of us. So I apologize to all of our listeners for not having pretty much anything in September. But I'm sure all 25 of you will be willing to forgive us.
Well, I mean, obviously, things are crazy everywhere. But I think hopefully, I will say in anticipation, Octobers are hard for me, not just because it's the, my favorite time of the year and all of the shenanigans that come with it being October, but it's also multiple people in my family's birthdays. It's the beginning of the fiscal year for my day job. So Octobers are rough. But hopefully we can get a few bangers out in this month too, because obviously this is it's a big time for horror and horror movies in general because of Halloween. And I'm sure we'll play into that. But tonight is really what matters. We live in the moment. We don't worry about the past or look into the future. Therein lies anxiety. We live in the moment. And tonight we have a very cool episode tonight, a little different from other episodes we've done, celebrating somebody we've talked about a lot on this podcast. We have a little double feature tonight. Devin, do you want to tell the people about our little double feature we have tonight?
Sure. That's the second double feature that we've done. I've enjoyed doing these because I'm able to actually research some of the other stuff we have upcoming while we're doing the double features. But this time we're doing two by one of our favorite actors, mutually, both of one of our favorite actors, two with Nicolas Cage. And, in light of the fact that when we do a double feature, we try to do something that's as new as we can get it. And so this time around, we are doing the Nicolas Cage film Pig from this year. And we've paired it up. We paired it up before either one of us saw the movie Pig. We didn't know what we were going to pair it up with or what would be the most appropriate. We paired it up with one that gets some attention, but probably not enough attention, which is 2009's Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans.
That's right.
So there are a couple others that came up on the list first, but we kept on thinking, we're probably going to put that in such and such episode, and we'll do that one in another episode, and that one we've already talked about twice. And it seems like we spend a lot of time talking about Nicolas Cage, and I think there's a few reasons for that. For one, like I said, he's one of our mutual favorites.
Absolutely.
And I definitely think that we should do a Nicolas Cage centric deep dive sometime in the near future, maybe sometime early next year. But also because Nicolas Cage is really keeping up the good fight in keeping independent film alive. And he has an output that's somewhere in the average of 5 or 6 movies a year, which is really pretty nuts any way you slice it.
Yeah, he's become, he is, I think there's something to be said to not just, for the love of working Willem Dafoe, or not Willem Dafoe, oh, good Lord, Christopher Walken. So, Christopher Walken a few years ago was known because he was super prolific and coming out with everything, but Nicolas Cage is just nonstop working and doing some of his most interesting, challenging, bizarro movies, which, for the career of Nicolas Cage to say he's been doing some bizarro movies is saying something, because the man, his career path has always been a little off the beaten path. But yeah, he's been doing some incredible stuff. And we've talked about it in this podcast. I feel like I see him get brought up in list of worst actors, and it's infuriating, because even if you take movies that he's in that the movie itself is bad, arguably a movie like the Wicker Man remake gets derided a lot, and rightfully so. I could say a lot about that movie, but I'll save it. But he's always great, and he's always going along to the beat of his own drum, so to speak, and he's definitely doing his own thing, and I really appreciate that. I don't know where I got off on that tangent, but yeah.
Well, because it's easy to get off on a tangent with Nick Cage. Right. I have a couple of quotes here that kind of describe Cage's style. I do have a quote here by the great David Lynch on his style, where he called him, quote, the jazz musician of acting, which I think is pretty fair. There's a lot of improvisation that goes along with the deeper understanding of the art form itself. So it's that kind of improvisation that comes from actually a deep level of studying before you get to where you're going to improvise. I think that's a good way to describe Cage. And
Absolutely.
then I found this quote. I'm not sure exactly which film Cage is talking about in particular. I I probably could have done the extra minute of research and figure out which movie he means specifically, but I kind of like it as a random quote from Cage and pertaining to any film. And he said, "I am not a demon. I am a lizard, a shark, a heat-seeking panther. I want to be Bob Denver on acid playing the accordion." I think
that says everything you need to know.
Exactly. And we all know Cage has kind of had some money woes, many of which were somewhat self-inflicted by some insane buying habits and some bad investments and things. Some of it, I think he was genuinely screwed out of things. But the rumor is that he keeps on doing all of these works because he's trying to build back the fortune he lost kind of when he hit midlife. And I think he's probably made that back plus some at this point, even just from some of the smaller movies he's done that have gone on to be bigger successes and definitely champions of the streaming world. I know streaming does not give the highest residuals, but goddamn, Nicolas Cage is putting out so many movies. I'm sure that it's added up enough. He does it just because he is like a shark. He keeps on moving. He keeps on moving. And there's other actors of his generation, or maybe even a little bit ahead of him, who are still working today, but are really, really looked down as a joke. I'm looking at people like Bruce Willis and John Travolta and a couple of those others. And I think Cage has really separated himself from that ilk, and he's coming through into another multi-year long high point in his career, because unlike, let's say Bruce Willis specifically, unlike Bruce Willis keeps on doing whatever they put in front of him because he wants to keep working and because he wants the cash, and he'll essentially do work for hire. But he's phoning it in on everything. No matter what you give Nicolas Cage, no matter what the script is like, no matter what the budget is like, he has an overabundance of shits to give about what he's going to give you in his performance. And you can see there's like YouTube videos where Cage will talk about all of his different performances, and he has an answer for everything. This long explanation as to why he picked this personal kind of characterization, why H.I. McDonough has some Woody Woodpecker in him, and why his character in Peggy Sue Got Married is Pokey from Gumby. And, he makes all these really interesting decisions, and he experiments, and he goes way out there, and sometimes it's hard to pull himself back in, I'm sure, but he's never phoned in a performance in his life. He absolutely cares, and he experiments, and he tries. And that is why Bruce Willis will continue to make shitty movies over and over and over again. And Nicolas Cage is now being rewarded by kind of getting screenplays from people that recognize what he's giving to each individual role.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you look at, he's done some really fascinating things recently.
He's had an incredible 5 or so years, 5, 6,
Absolutely.
7 years.
And, I think he gets, even with like doing a lot of like weird role, like quote unquote weird roles, I think people sort of, they don't understand the sheer variety, the sheer kind of different personas that he's not just playing weird movies and playing weird characters. Each of those quote unquote weird characters is completely different from, each other. And they're very nuanced and very 3-dimensional, characters. And I think like, if anything, it's really impressive that he is able to find so many new ways to surprise his fans and surprise audiences, whether it's with his roles specifically or with the films he takes. And I mean, I have the utmost respect for him as an actual artist and stuff. And, I hope he keeps going for as long as he can, because like you said, he's had a hell of a run in the last 5 years.
He's apparently taking a little break after his last one, which has not been released yet. It's worthy of noting we're doing Pig because it's the newest Nicolas Cage movie, but I think he's already put out 2 movies since we decided to do Pig. That's how fast the turnaround goes on that. but the one of the ones, it's actually not out yet, but one of the ones that's coming up is called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, in which Nicolas Cage plays Nicolas Cage.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I did hear about that.
He's been talking about it quite a bit and how exhausting it was to play himself, and how it'll probably be the first movie of his own that he will not see. He said he'll be at the premiere, but he won't be in the audience, just because it would be hard for him to kind of see him playing himself in a way. But he was asked about, and I'm going to have to paraphrase some of this. I don't have any of the exact quotes, but I was really entertained by it. He was asked after he was finished making that movie about why he doesn't take breaks. And he says, I always worked really hard and I went from movie to movie because I always said, guys like Humphrey Bogart and guys like Clark Gable, nobody ever asked them why they made so many movies. They just kept on going and kept on going. And they made something like, and then you can almost feel him checking IMDb real quick in his pocket and going, oh shit. Like the realization came over him that he had done more movies than Humphrey Bogart and Clark Gable had. And still had, knock on wood, several decades more to be working, because he's only in his mid-50s. So with any luck, we have another like 50 years worth of Nicolas Cage going nuts. I'm kind of pulling for him to live to 105. But I
love it.
But yeah, then after he realized that Bogart and Gable had done fewer movies than he had, he says, yeah, I think maybe I'm going to take a break after this one.
Maybe a good idea.
Yeah, it's good to recharge a little bit. And exactly. I think especially when you're Nicolas Cage. I don't know what goes on in his brain, but it's maybe now is a time to kind of rest back and enjoy what he's accomplished since those hardships really began, and to be proud of what his output is now.
Absolutely. I mean, if anything, I feel like as an artist, it can only give him more perspective. And again, I think he's in high demand specifically because he will work on these smaller independent films that are probably like it's a little weirder or like maybe harder to get financing, and a lot of people look for him because at this point they know he's a name and he likes to work and stuff. But I think if he's out of the public eye, he'll be able to come back and people will also be like, damn, I missed you, Nicolas Cage. We're so happy you're back. And it will sort of help even rejuvenate his already incredible career. So
I hope so. I know he's got a couple more coming out before that really takes into effect and we'll start to miss him. But if he's leaving us hanging on stuff like Pig, then we're going to be begging for him to come back. Before we get into these specific movies, I do want to warn our audience. We didn't do this on purpose, but the two movies that we picked, some people may consider them kind of spoilable because they have plot points that people think that you shouldn't talk about. And I do want to point out real quick, I think we need to, as a culture, make sure that we know what a spoiler actually is. The spoiler is not really a plot point. We've gotten into this place where like, okay, in 1999, I'm not going to tell you that Bruce Willis is a ghost if I'm trying to get you to see the movie, because that's a twist ending. And it's supposed to make you feel a particular way.
Yeah.
But if they revealed that Bruce Willis was a ghost like 20, 30 minutes prior to when they do in the movie, I don't think that anybody would have been able to do a review of Sixth Sense without revealing that he was a ghost. Like a plot point is a plot point. And if we were doing just real quick kind of write-ups and reviews like I've seen for both of these movies in the last few weeks, then we might be able to skirt some of this stuff. But I do want to give people a heads up that there's literally no way to discuss Pig and Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans without giving away plot points, because otherwise the discussion is going to be completely flat. So we'll do our best. And if anything really does qualify as a spoiler, we'll try to throw out a couple second warning. But yeah, we're going to be discussing some things ahead, just to give you a heads up.
Yes.
Otherwise, I don't think we are doing these justice. And to be fair, let's start with Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans, because that way at least we're talking about one that's over a decade old at this point.
Sounds good. If you can do that.
And if we have to end up giving away some stuff in Pig, at least it's towards the end of our episode.
Sounds good. I can definitely get on board that. Before we go on, I hadn't seen Port Call since it came out, and I was like, let me rewatch it. And so I ended up rewatching it. But we had kept pushing this back, so it's now I might have actually forgotten things again, but
same here.
For the most part.
hopefully
for the most part, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Well, it's so packed full. That's the thing. Like every moment, every scene is its own show. I wish that there was a way that I could ask for a show of hands for how many of you have seen Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. Because this was one when it was still new. This was one that I picked up on Blu-ray and had to convince multiple friends to watch with me because they were just dismissive, either because they were dismissive of Nicolas Cage in general, or they were dismissive because they were Abel Ferrara fans, which I want to point out to anybody that has not seen this movie. Being a fan of the Abel Ferrara, Harvey Keitel Bad Lieutenant, and using that as a reason to not watch this movie is completely invalid. It is not, this is not a remake.
Yeah.
Herzog, Werner Herzog, the director of Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, and honestly, one of the most fascinating people to listen to speak on the whole planet.
I will not argue that.
I think he may have, if he was responsible for this title, then he was only responsible in ignorance that there was another movie called Bad Lieutenant. Now, Bad Lieutenant and Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans do share a producer, Edward R. Pressman, but Pressman has produced so much stuff that I find it hard to believe that he would need to market a Werner Herzog movie as a Bad Lieutenant movie to somehow connect it back to his previous legacy film. I mean, this is one of the guys that produced Scarface. I mean, he's been around forever. So I don't know exactly where that title became a thing, but I know that Herzog has said that the title itself is problematic and that if he had a chance, he would have changed it, probably just a Port of Call, New Orleans. But I got to say, that's a really dull title in and of itself.
See, I just assumed, I mean, I never did too much research, but I just assumed it was like first off, the similarities just to the big picture idea of what the movie is, which is essentially, a cop, who's basically so far outside of the law and just sort of, I just assume, my assumption has always just been that it wasn't not necessarily a sequel or remake, but just, I'm almost kind of like just a spiritual sequel, basically. But again, I never looked too deeply into it as that goes, but there's definitely similarities in the overall title. So
yeah. And Abel Ferrara was pissed. And that was, I think, part of why the is it a remake, is it not a remake argument got so contentious at a certain point. Because Abel Ferrara is he's indie all the way through. He's been one of the strongest indie artists of the last 40, almost 50 years. And when he found out that they were, quote unquote, remaking Bad Lieutenant, he threw a fit. I think he literally said that the producers could go to hell. He tried to do everything he could to get the title changed. I really don't know why they didn't, because especially knowing that Herzog was not necessarily in favor of the title. But apparently Herzog and Ferrara have kind of made up and have had a couple of conversations with each other. But I think when Herzog first heard about Abel Ferrara's little fit, his comment was something along the lines of, I've never even heard of Abel Ferrara. I don't know who that is, which couldn't have made Abel Ferrara feel better. I don't know if that was meant as a slam, but the fact of the matter is that Werner Herzog's voice is so distinctive and so kind of like German honey, whatever that would be, that I think that if he was getting in a dig at you, it would feel 10 times worse to hear that voice insulting you or that voice saying, I don't know who you are, So,
well, I will say this. To me, that definitely sounds like it sounds like a dig. I mean, it's definitely possible, but it's not like Abel Ferrara hasn't made a lot of very influential films and a lot of like very, we should do a whole episode on him just because he's such a fascinating character, and his films have always sort of skirted trash and art at the same time. And he's an interesting character, and I am a very legitimate big fan. But to me, if I was Abel Ferrara and there was another living actor on planet Earth who I wouldn't mind kind of doing a unofficial remake or whatever you want to call it, it would be Werner Herzog, because they just seem like they might have a lot in common.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. It had to have been a dig, because there's a part of me that just finds it completely unbelievable that Werner Herzog would never have heard of Abel Ferrara in that span of time. But, then again, this is a guy, Werner Herzog spent a lot of time with Klaus Kinski, and crazy can be contagious. So
that's right.
But yeah, I think it was a bit of a passive aggressive dig at the very least, which, to be fair, Abel Ferrara had at that point already publicly told Werner Herzog he can go to hell. So I don't think I don't, there's not really a place to draw right or wrong here, except for that the unfortunate part of it is here we are still talking about it. We haven't even really talked about the movie
itself.
Because this is, indicative of the kind of conversations that I had 10 years ago too, when I was trying to convince friends of ours to watch this movie with me and say, no, I promise you're going to enjoy this. It's batshit crazy. And Nicolas Cage does an incredible job. And the third act is one of the most insane, perplexing things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. What do you think is the most engaging part of this? The thing that makes the film work the most? If you could pick one thing.
I will very clearly say about both of the films we're discussing tonight that Nicolas Cage is the touchstone to both.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt.
It does not work with another actor.
No, I agree. That's what I was going to say. There's so much he makes the weirdest choices as an actor. That, and if another actor made the same choices and tried to make it work, it would be hysterical, but not in a good way. It would be very laughable. But let's get into it.
There are ways to play this part where Nicolas Cage could have become Bugs Bunny at any given moment.
Yeah.
The film starts, first off, it takes place in modern day New Orleans. We're looking at, it wasn't modern day New Orleans. It was, the film came out in 2009. I think it takes place in 2006, 7-ish, because it is tied to Katrina, which is part of why they chose New Orleans to begin with. They did want to, originally the script was in New York City, and thankfully they switched away from that. They said because of money, but that really would have brought down the Bad Lieutenant comparisons there, because the original Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel was very much a New York classic.
Yeah.
But they went to New Orleans because there was kind of a win-win situation in that it would be a little cheaper to film there, and that bringing a production to New Orleans after what they had experienced in Katrina, this was even 4 years later, it was going to benefit the town to have a movie shot there. And it starts off with Nicolas Cage coming into a police station just right after Katrina, like literally in the aftermath of Katrina and the cleanup. And he meets Val Kilmer there. Val Kilmer is actually great in this too. We'll get into the cast in a bit. There's a lot of really good people in this movie. But Val Kilmer and him are clearing out a locker. That's what it was. They were clearing out a locker for someone, and they realize that somebody is downstairs in the flooding jail cell, trapped, like still locked up, that he was never let out, evacuated when the hurricane hit. And so Val Kilmer and Nicolas Cage kind of sit there laughing at the guy. There's a poisonous water moccasin floating through, swimming through the water and like creeping around the bars and freaking this guy out. This guy's pleading for his life. And Kilmer and Cage are both just kind of giggling about this guy's situation. And Kilmer says, come on, man, let's go. Let's just let him rot. No one will ever even know. And Cage, despite the fact, as he points out, that he has like $3,000 underwear on or something like that.
I think it's like for like 50 grand. It's like something crazy, or $50, whatever. But it's like it's expensive underwear that his girlfriend bought. Yeah.
Something like it, yeah. But he jumps into the water to help this guy get out, which shows right at the outset that like he is kind of putting up a silly front with his friends who are maybe a bad influence on him, but in his heart, he's the good guy that jumps into moccasin-infested water to save someone who is clearly locked up for something. He wasn't in that cell by accident.
He starts the movie in a troubled area with like addiction and corruption.
I was going to say he doesn't have the addiction right at the offset.
I mean, it gets into his addiction pretty quickly.
Yeah, but it stems from the injury he sustains jumping into that water. The water was not as deep as it looked.
See, I get that, but I always got the feeling that because there were even in the relationship with he has with Eva Mendes, it's like it's clear he's a drug. I mean, he's
nobody falls
like,
quite that fast. Yes,
yeah,
I agree.
I think he's just blaming it on that with like the prescription part. Either way, but I think that scene shows that there's humanity and like there's really is. You can see the reason he became a cop in the first place, and it wasn't to get into the shenanigan he gets into. That at the heart of him, he still has that sort of heroic, inclination. But it's the whole point. The entire first part, that entire first scene, excuse me, it's him and Val Kilmer sort of making fun of this guy about to die, and they're just making it like it's not a big deal and stuff. And Val Kilmer's so great in this for this. I feel like he was really underused a lot. He kind of comes and goes in the movie, disappears for big periods of time.
Yeah, that happens with a lot. Like I felt the same about Jennifer Coolidge.
Yeah, but yes,
but it's Cage's show.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. So, but yeah, you can go on with your synopsis. But synopsis, yeah, that's right. But yeah, it's like I feel like it was just to show us that because we see there's again spoilers, blah blah blah, but there is some kind of well, let's get into it. I want to do this chronologically because I don't want to I guess spoil things like too early, but it is very fast. It's a really interesting scene, and it is a scene that comes back. Like it's not just this throwaway scene. There's a lot of importance to this first scene. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of crazy shit happens to the point that you were not really trusting the storytellers anymore as to what's real and what's not real, or even in terms of what's realistic and not realistic. Because, like we said, like according to the timeline of the movie, he goes from 0 to 60 as a drug addict.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how much of that is we're meant to believe. And I almost think that we are supposed to just take it at face value on that, but I'll tell you why later when we get into spoilers. But it's certainly not realistic. But anyways, we flash forward a few months. It's been revealed that Nicolas Cage's character is going to have to be fair, I should stop calling him Nicolas Cage in this context. He's playing a character named Terry McDonough, which I again, Herzog is so weird, and McDonough is an odd enough last name that it would, in the hands of anyone else, I would almost think that it's a nod towards H.I. McDonough. But anyways, Terrence is being told by his doctor that he's going to have lifelong pain in his back, and he's got this heavy prescription to help him out with it. And then he's being awarded with a promotion to lieutenant for his actions during Katrina, where he saved this guy who was locked up. So we start with him being honored, and everything seems like, okay, sucks for him, but hey, he got something out of it. And then from there, it just kind of, I don't know how else to describe it. He seems to turn wacky the moment any of his superiors' backs are turned, and a murder takes place. A family gets killed, execution style, including the children. And he is given the case because he is now a big hotshot lieutenant. So they're giving him a chance to prove himself on this one, whether he can take a big case. And he immediately sends everybody out to do the work, and then he goes off. I think it happens right there. He goes off to meet up instead with his prostitute girlfriend, where he even goes so far as to like illegally park in front of her. Like this guy at this point is, if nobody's looking, he's doing something illegal, even if it's parking.
Yeah,
absolutely
true.
We see that he has a cocaine habit. We're going to go on to see that he has a crack habit.
There's all kinds of habits.
He's all kinds of habits. God, I don't really know where to go with this one in a way that makes any sense. There's so many non-contextual things happening. And it does have some things in common with the Ferrara Keitel version,
the original one,
in terms of him kind of chasing after young people in order to get their drugs, or unfortunately, trigger warning, there is a rape scene. It's one of the most bizarre rape scenes I've ever seen in my life.
See, let's talk about that scene, because it's so fast. I feel like that young actress should have won some kind of award because she was so believable in such a very uncomfortable scene.
Yes,
it's definitely assault of some kind. It's even hard to tell what's actually happening. Well,
it's definitely sexual assault.
Oh yeah,
she can.
I mean, she's using that to she actually kind of is the one that initiates that. It's so hard to explain, but basically to get out of, basically being busted for possession of drugs and stuff. This boyfriend, girlfriend who just had left a club, Cage knows they have drugs, and he basically just wants to shake them down for their drugs, and basically uses his authority to basically get them to admit they have drugs on them and take them. But he basically is bullying them and harassing them, and to the point that they give up their drugs. But the girlfriend starts to basically, she's trying to get out of it in any way she can, and then it becomes a sexual exchange, and it's very uncomfortable. There's almost which I can't even say this. There's an element of comedy to it, though. It's especially the way that there's a scene where like the boyfriend wants to run away and Cage shoots his gun, and basically is making him watch this very weird, awkward sexual exchange. Because again, it's the mechanics of what's happening are very bizarre. But
the boyfriend's being sexually assaulted at the same time. It's
exactly, yeah.
It's completely bonkers, and it's not your typical, like, she's not running away because she's street smart enough to know that this is what it's going to take to make this go away. Right. Because this predatory cop has pulled up on them.
Exactly. And she is, trying to go along, like she's trying to placate this guy, this, insane cop or whatever. And it's a scene it's the first, and there's the original one has much crazier. The sexual tones in this are far more subdued than in the Abel Ferrara version. It's really
only in this scene. Otherwise,
there's a sort of, again, there's a duplicate scene towards the end that's almost the same exact scenario where they're sort of showing you that he's. Anyways, we'll get there. But yeah, it's really uncomfortable. But again, there's the way that Nick Cage. First off, there's a choice of like the way that it's hard to talk about. But like to be graphic, it's not like he's bending her over the front of the car or whatever. It's like, I don't know, just the mechanics of it are so weird. And I wonder why they went with that choice, because I don't know, it's so hard to but regardless, it's just this weird, very violent. It's not even necessarily like overtly violent. It's emotionally violent more than anything, but it's just this very ugly, bizarre kind of sexual assault scene that really, this is the star of the movie. This is the main character of the movie. And then this is like sort of very early in the film where you really see he is just a piece of shit. Again, I'm not trying to. She initiates it. She's offering it because she wants to get out of this thing, and she's using that, and she knows it. But he, he's quick to take advantage of it. And then, like I said, he forces the boyfriend to watch because that's also turning him on or whatever. And it's very creepy, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, but no, this is a situation. She doesn't really initiate it. He initiates it by even coming over. She doesn't have to consent in this scenario for it to be an assault.
Well, that's the thing, is like, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's why to me it's hard to explain, because I think she's the one that, again, this is maybe I need to rewatch it, but I think she actually initiates the actual physical contact with him. As far as
I think she reads the writing on the wall. I think she reads like, okay, this is what really makes this go away.
Yeah, again, I'm not, like I said before letters coming, whatever. I'm not saying that what it was an assault because she went along with it, or even if she initiated the physical, like she was trying to seduce him or turn him on so that he wouldn't arrest them or whatever. That still doesn't make it right. It still doesn't make it not assault or whatever, even if that is the scenario. Which again,
well,
I don't know. That's the way I read the scene, but.
I do agree with you. I think in the similar scene in the first Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel, it is clear that the assault is the objective to Harvey Keitel in that scene. With Bad Lieutenant, you feel like Cage is going into this high. He's coming down. He wants more of the drug. And if they just left him with the drug, he probably would have left them alone. But when she puts forward that she's willing to do this other thing, he basically says, yeah, okay,
absolutely. And then he's very into it, and it's very, regardless of what, like, of all the
it's nuances, never justified. And
it's very it's disturbing and gross. And he, at that point,
I don't know that scene exists if it's made 10 years later.
I don't know, man. I mean,
Herzog is not going to really pull punches, but at the same time, I think even Cage at that point would say that this is maybe a little too ambiguous.
I mean, at no point in the film is it saying this guy is a good person. He's a guy that has good in him and has chosen to do a few good things, but he's a piece of shit. I mean, he's a narcissist. He's a fucking
he's awful. Yeah.
He's a scumbag, but
he's a really bad lieutenant.
Yeah. But, I don't want to spend, I don't want to spend an hour just going over, plot point by plot point, but.
And I may cut some of this conversation because this is, I'm sweating.
But I do think, I agree with you, but I think that's the really interesting part of it, though. I think, because the movie is about characters that are not black and white. It's about scenarios that are definitely not black and white. And again, there is a complexity there. Because even if, like I said, even if she, in this scene, even if she does participate in a little bit of the physical aspect, she's doing it because she's being forced to do she's forced into it in one way or another. Whether, he is accosting them both completely illegally, completely out of bounds. And what he's doing is, he's basically putting them into a situation where she's basically kind of in a way fighting for her life or fighting for her freedom, whatever. And so regardless, I mean, definitely edit how we want to edit it. But again, I think the scene is actually pretty indicative of what Werner Herzog and the film itself is trying to do, which is really show you this terrible person, but also he's surrounded by character. I mean, again, they're not, which let me just say for the record, just sort of digging it deeper at this point, but they're not great. They're terrible. I mean, you can tell right from the get-go, they're kind of scumbag people. They're these sort of, I mean, although maybe you can just say they're young, whatever, but you can tell they've both used affluence and power and rich, their wealth and position society to get the things they want. And she is definitely probably very much, she's probably more street smart than the young gentleman it's a whole thing. But regardless, it's a very complex film because we're forced to watch that, like I said, very disturbing scene. But this is the for all intents and purposes, he's not, I mean, you can't say he's the protagonist because, I mean, he's the star of the main character we're following is just a terrible person. It's just a very interesting film. Let's
it is. And the intentions are murky, and this is the last thing I'll say about it. The intentions are murky, but I think the idea, and I think you're right in saying that he's targeting people of affluence because I think that in his stoned mind clears his conscience a little bit of it. And she initiates in the sense that, unfortunately, it seems like it's coming from the perspective of, I know this game. I've been here before.
And that's exactly it. And
he may not be looking for that, but he's not going to turn it away when it's offered.
And he's very quick to get it.
Yeah. And she has probably been forced to do this by other people.
Probably even other cops, honestly.
Probably
she's very
Val Kilmer.
Yeah, exactly.
In the movie, in the context of the movie.
Let's make that very clear.
But there's an interesting sort of thing in this where there are definitely making statements on people of affluence, and they're making statements on people of poverty, living amongst these people of affluence. But it's a weird scene because it seems to be separate from the plot. It seems whatever the plot happens to be. But Nicolas Cage's character, it seems like all of his bad influences are the cops, because once he starts to dive more into a more criminal world and starts to actually make deals with some of the people that he's actually going after lawfully, the whole world is kind of cracked. But it actually seems like the thugs on the street have a stronger code to live by than the police do.
Yeah, and that exact plot point is actually that's an actual plot point kind of in the movie.
The killer is a better guy than he is. His bookie is a better guy than he is. Yeah. His prostitute girlfriend is better than he is.
Yeah, and
as a human being.
I will say it's a very interesting movie in the fact that, like I said, it's a, the most, it's hard to, I mean, again, everybody he touches in some way is sort of not a great person. And the people all
damaged.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to look at it. But, the few normal, quote unquote, normal people he meets, he completely accosts, like the lady in the pharmacy and stuff. It's an emotionally ugly film, but it's a very compelling film. And I don't shy away from emotionally ugly films. It's, those kinds of films can definitely have merit and worth and stuff. And you can have an emotionally ugly film if it's done by talented people with, talented actors and smart script and a talented director. Like doing like an ugly film just for the sake of being ugly does nothing. It doesn't accomplish anything. But in this, where you do have this, I mean, Val Kilmer's character, I mean, literally every character is a piece of shit, but they're all handled really intelligently or really uniquely. But yeah, I don't want to go, like I said, I don't want to spend the entire, I mean, this will be a 6-hour podcast almost if we discuss each and every single plot point or scene. But let me ask you, does his fucking accent change halfway through the movie where it becomes this sort of like very nasally, cartoonish? I don't even know if it's supposed to be like a I don't know what I watched it and I'm watching the movie and this is fun. Like it just all of a sudden he just starts talking in a different voice. Am I crazy or is that true? He just sort of like halfway through the movie, his voice gets extra nasally and extra like kind of like Weasley.
If it's true, then I would think that it was a distinction that Cage made to indicate that this guy is more high or has done more coke or is starting to get, something going on with his nose, maybe with his septum.
Something.
I don't know if he researches this stuff or how much he goes from the gut, but he thinks about everything.
Yeah, he does.
He does mention in interviews that he was completely dry when he made this movie. Unlike his Oscar-winning turn in Leaving Las Vegas, where he would sometimes swish around some whiskey in his mouth and spit it out. And other scenes he wanted to do full on plastered because he was playing an alcoholic. In this, he says that it was a period of his time where he stopped all drugs, all drinking, all of this because he wanted to do this movie clean. And he says the only tension he ever had on, he said the only tension he ever had on the set with Herzog was when he was snorting the cocaine substitute, which I think was some kind of sugar. He was doing quite a bit of it to get himself ramped up, and he probably did get an incredible sugar high off of it if it was a sugar substitute. But he was getting so into it in the prep before they shot the scene that Herzog actually approached him and said, "Nicholas, what's in the vial?" And Cage got pissed. He said he had to get pissed or else he was going to lose the character. He's like, "You want me to play this really big character and I'm supposed to be really high, and then you ask me what's in my vial. I can't tell you what's in my vial or I'll blow it. Roll the camera."
That's the shit I love about real artists or real, it's like to give us that kind of performance or those kind of characters. Like, I don't think it's pretentious. I don't think it's problematic. I don't think it's like douchey.
Not in this case. He wasn't asking to be named the character off, when the cameras weren't running.
He's trying to get into this big character and don't fucking take him out of it. Like, I'm sure it's hard to get into that headspace and do it as compellingly as he was able to do in this film. That's funny. I didn't hear that story. When this film came out, my core group of friends, I mean, people that we also have in common, but friends were super into this movie when it came out. Everybody really liked it. And there's a lot of stuff going on about, the film itself or whatever. But, it's one of those things. I'm sure look at the people involved, Werner Herzog and fucking Nicolas Cage. I'm sure there's some crazy set stories. So I was sort of anticipating that going into this podcast. And that's the stuff I find really fascinating. But, ultimately, Nicolas Cage is known to do weird things, or we've talked about different things on this podcast. But the other thing that, this movie isn't a comedy by any stretch of the imagination, but there's so many funny elements to it, and there's so many funny, great moments of comedy that really kind of give it such a unique vibe and help it from being this really emotionally damaging movie. But it's definitely a thing for me where the plot itself. Again, I don't really want to get too into every single plot point, but it's basically he's trying to con his way out. Keeps doing fucked up things with the wrong people. I will say this though. I had this question. One thing I found very unbelievable in this film is that anybody, I don't care what kind of organized crime, the way that people brazenly sort of try to strong arm him into owing them money or whatever. I'm like, he's still a fucking cop. I don't know. It's one thing for it, depending on how it's done. But first off, not only is he a cop, but he's obviously a fucking lunatic. So, as a criminal, you sort of almost want to get out of this guy's way. But that's not what happened. But he does use this Machiavellian he maneuvers himself to sort of end up, again, plot spoilers, but at one point it's like everything in the world is sort of coming on top of me. You know, his gun and badge was taken from him. There's these gangsters out to kill him. He's multiple people are out to like, you know, get him or whatever. But it's a fascinating the way that they sort of maneuver his character through the film and how he basically gets through it scot-free at that point. I'll let you talk more, but like I said, I don't want to go into every single plot point because we will be here forever. But given enough, like I said, we could spend 30 minutes just on one single scene. But go ahead, like if you want to tell more about your opinions or whatever. But
this is a difficult one because there is a plot, but it's so loose that it's really more a series of vignettes. And if you pay close enough attention, you'll find the plot within these vignettes. Cage has said that he did everything he could. This kind of links back into him being dry during the making of this. But he didn't want to do anything that made it look like he was having fun. He didn't want to make drugs look fun. He basically didn't want to do a commercial. And he said that this was something that he didn't really talk to Werner Herzog about. This is because Herzog wanted it to be, and this is Nicolas Cage doing Herzog, but I'm not going to do a Herzog voice because I suck at it. But I can actually, just hearing the words tied together, I can hear it in Herzog's voice saying it. Herzog said it was about the bliss of evil. And he does appear to be having fun through a lot of this.
Yeah.
And he's around a lot of people who are suffering at the same time, which is really juxtaposing off him. And you know that he's suffering too, because even within the first few minutes, he's got this massive back problem. Yeah. Eva Mendes gives an incredible performance as his girlfriend. She's also addicted. At the same time, they never really explain how this relationship works outside of maybe it's just two broken people that found each other and that was all that it needed to work. But you never really doubt that they have true feelings for each other. And it would have been easy to pass off that, he likes her because, she's an easy lay, and she likes him because he can bring her drugs and not bust her.
And also kind of protect her. Because that's sort of what he does. Even in moments where you think he's not protecting her, he's still protecting her. And that's one of the scenes I think that's probably one of the most compelling scenes is, when the gangsters come to sort of, he pissed off the wrong people. He pissed off the wrong guy whose family's tied, is connected. And then people show up to his girlfriend's house ready to not only beat them up and take their money, but two of the goons, or possibly kill them. But the two goons want to have a free night with, his prostitute girlfriend. And that scene is super tense. And in fact, that the guy who plays the head gangster in that or the debt collector, again, fucking great performance. He's so good in that character. He brings a lot of uniqueness to that role and a lot of, weird humanity, but not necessarily in the best ways, but he just seems like a really real person.
He reminded me a little bit of Mark Rydell's performance in The Long Goodbye.
I can definitely see that.
I spent 5 hours talking about Long Goodbye in our last episode, so I won't get to it.
No, but that's actually a pretty apt comparison. But it's definitely one of those things where, again, this is a scene where, everybody involved in the scene is some kind of criminal or scumbag. But you obviously don't want the harm to come to Eva Mendes, specifically because she's the least scumbag. I mean, she's a, drug addicted prostitute, but I don't think either of those things make you necessarily a bad person. They're probably, they're both life choices and whatever, but she's about to deal with something probably pretty upsetting. And Nicolas Cage sort of comes to the rescue. And again, through his machinations and, he's very flippant in the moment to be like, like, get her a fresh step. You don't want it to be all like, it's, the way he's coming across is very kind of ugly and like, he doesn't care. But you can tell in that moment, he's trying to save her skin. He's trying to get her out of this terrible situation. And that's exactly where I think where really the heart of the story is. Yes, he caused this terrible situation because he tried to fucking strong arm and fucking harass one of her clients who was also being a piece of shit and, whatever. Again,
he wasn't paying her. That was the whole...
Wasn't paying her for, whatever. But, again, he's trying to like abuse his power as a cop and blah, blah, blah. And he's gotten away with it before, but he just happens to this time choose a dude that's, can actually cause him some damage in life. But anyways, yeah, you have this scene where it's this ugly scene, but at the heart of it is about a guy who's trying to save this woman that he truly cares about and loves or whatever. And he's just doing it in a way that, not what a normal movie would do, but it's a fantastic scene. And I think, there's so many brilliant, like, when he thinks he sees the chameleon, the chameleon or Gila, I forget what it was. The lizards.
Yeah, it was an iguana. He at one
Iguana.
point they're on a stakeout. They're watching through the window to see if this guy's going to run. And while everyone else is looking out the window, Nicolas Cage is staring at two iguanas on a table for an extended amount of time, as inexplicably Tom Jones's version of "Please Release Me"
That's right. Yep.
plays at like top volume. And we're actually kind of starting to get like the lizard eye effect. Like the camera's down by the lizards.
Yep.
And he's just staring at them while everyone else is staring a different direction. And it kind of, I guess symbolically speaking, he's always looking somewhere else than where everyone else is looking.
There you go.
Something similar happens too later on where in a very surprising set of circumstances that brings two of his foes into the same room together into a shootout amongst themselves.
Yep.
When he does that whole bit of like, no, his soul's still dancing, and inexplicably shows this character's dead body on the ground, and some dude's break dancing over it.
Yep, and doing a jig and all this crazy shit.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It couldn't just be like someone waltzing, or it could have just been nothing at all.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But Herzog puts a break dancer in there to symbolize to Cage's character that this person's soul is still dancing, and so this person isn't dead.
Shoot him
yet.
again.
Yeah, shoot him again. His soul's still dancing.
So crazy. And I think, and honestly, I think that's to me the magic of Herzog, because it's so ludicrous and so out of the blue, but it matches the tone of the movie. Like it does. It's not so. I mean, it's jarring because it just that scene is going to be jarring, but it makes so much sense logically in this plot in this movie that he's basically just so high. He's seeing crazy shit and laughing hysterically and being like a pure maniac.
Well, he had just finished a conversation with Exhibit about his lucky crack pipe.
Exactly. So. But again, and that's the great moment. Again, the character is he is making all these machinations, all these plots to get his ass out of the fryer. And you don't know that. Like, you don't know that's what's going on. You just think he's fucking a lunatic high on drugs. But even though, and he is a lunatic who's high on drugs, but he's smart enough to start to, plant the seeds of how he's going to get out of this. And that's, basically forcing Exhibit to smoke out of his lucky crack pipe. It's so fascinating.
I was going to bring up the end, but then before I get to the end though, or the last act, I really think that I'm doing this film a disservice if I don't even mention the scene with the two old ladies, because it's seriously one of the most batshit crazy things I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's fucked up.
The one person who witnessed this execution of a family earlier in the movie, you discover is a 15-year-old black boy, and he finds out, Nicolas Cage finds out that this kid's grandmother takes care of an older white lady at a retirement village or whatever. And so he goes down there because he's trying to find the kid, and there ends up being a couple of scenes there, but long story short, minor spoiler, the kid runs away, which is part of how Nicolas Cage is in so much trouble, because he runs away on Cage's watch, and now this whole case is blown. And it was for something really stupid, like Cage was getting high or something, and the kid ran out of the car. I can't remember exactly what it was, but now he's gone back, and he is insane because he's about to lose this case, and he owes money to all these people, including his bookie, played by Brad Dourif. So he's reached his breaking point.
Which I have to say too, I forgot he had a part in it. I was like, man, I'm always happy to see. I actually just asked Brad Dourif I sent him a friend request on Facebook, because it turns out we have 200 friends in common. And I was like, if 200 of my friends could be friends with Brad Dourif, I'm going to be friends with Brad Dourif.
I met him once. I got him to sign my VHS of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was at a Fangoria convention. So I think everyone was handing him Chucky stuff, and
of course,
and I came through with Cuckoo's Nest, and I think I took him back a little. Anyways, back to this scene with these two fine older actresses, who I'm sure are very nice people in real life. It's horrifying to watch. The one lady is doing the hair of the older white lady, and the older white lady is clearly affluent, for one thing. but it has like an oxygen tank and is like hooked up by the nose. And when he comes in with his gun out and he's threatening these two older ladies, trying to find out where the grandson of one of them went, and the older lady, the white lady, says something along the lines of like, "We don't have to tell you anything. We know what our rights are." And Cage just takes her oxygen away. He just takes it off and starts watching her suffocate and starts screaming, "Where's the kid?" You know, whatever it is. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And then finally, when he gets the information he wants, he tucks the oxygen tube nicely back into her nose, like he's almost going to apologize.
Exactly.
Instead, he stands up and he looks at them, and she's now safely breathing again, but obviously very shooken up. Yeah. And he just starts screaming and waving his gun at them, saying that they're exactly what's wrong with this country.
That's right.
He hopes that they die because they're what's wrong. And it's so,
I love it.
You see the movie just for that scene alone. It's not a comfortable scene, and it's exactly like what you've been saying. This is not a comedy, but the only way you can react is to laugh because
it's so ludicrous. Again, the thing is, Cage is an actor that brings such a life to his roles. Like, he goes to a volume that most people either couldn't match, or if they did match, it would be fucking, idiotic. But he's able to take roles to a level and to an energy that there's just a comedy to it anyways, because he's so in the moment and playing it at such a volume, but it still works, and again, it works because he believes that shit. Nicolas Cage isn't trying to sell you a line of bullshit. He is fully into whatever it is he's doing.
He's invested.
He's committing to make it work. And that scene is perfect. But it's I don't feel like we need to give away the ending, but I do, like I said, there is something. Well, if you want to go into it, you can definitely feel free.
I will just say this. It does not end in any way that you think that it's going to end.
No.
Just like every other individual scene in the movie, you don't know how any individual scene is going to end in this movie. And especially if you were a fan of the original Bad Lieutenant, you might go in thinking where this is going. Yeah. But the thing is, there's a certain part of our brains that tell us, oh, we've seen this movie before. You've never seen anything like this one. But there's enough tropes in any bad cop movie that you just feel like, okay, now I'm just waiting for the intense situation where this is all going to come to its violent conclusion, and it subverts that. It goes a completely different direction. And just to loop it back into the beginning real quick, because this is something I was saying before about why I think we are meant to believe that he just suddenly got an addiction when he had this back problem, is that about 15 minutes before the actual proper end of the movie, within the span of 30 seconds of McDonough's life sitting at his desk, one person comes up and boom, one thing solved. Another person comes up, bam, another thing solved. Another person walks up to the desk, bam, another thing. Like, it's just this parade of story closure that's circling through.
Exactly. It's ridiculous, but it's all...
You would never believe that this sort of thing could ever happen in real life, and it never would, which is what makes me think that the absurdity of that ending makes me think that there may be also a deliberate absurdity to how quickly he gets addicted to drugs.
Yeah, I can see that. The movie has this sort of like, it makes you think he's sort of on the straight and narrow path, like he sort of learned his lesson, and then it quickly goes, no, he didn't.
No, he didn't learn his lesson. But then it ends on a note where he might, because it comes full back circle to that.
That's what exactly what I was going to say.
The guy in the jail cell. And that's not a spoiler necessarily, but.
Well, it's all a spoiler. But again, if you haven't, it's 2021. If you wanted to see it, you should have seen it. If you're listening to first off, if you listen to a podcast and you know that it's, what are you doing? Like, you know what I mean? I still get upset when people be like, oh, you spoiled it. You saw the episode was about the movie. You think we're not going to talk about the movie? But ultimately, I definitely think you don't even have to. The movie isn't for everybody. Well, let's just be honest. Like, the movie's not for a wide audience. It's probably has a more narrow focus than other movies we've talked about. But you don't need to be a Herzog fan, and you don't even need to be a Nicolas Cage fan. The movie is stands on its own legs. Like I said, it goes to places that maybe aren't comfortable for everybody, and it's definitely a movie that can be upsetting if you're, whatever. But it's a great. I mean, it's a really. I mean, Herzog. He's never. He's made movies I like more than I like other, but he's such a visionary talent. Like, and he's such a literally just a capable actual director that, like, it's obviously I think, like, the names involved should give you a hint of the actual quality of the film and the merits of the film, despite everything we've just said over the last hour and 20 minutes of what the film actually entails. It's still, like I said, I think it's a great film.
I agree. I fully endorse this film. It's subversively an art film that looks and at times even feels like it's just boilerplate cop drama, but every scene has some little thing that's going to pop on you, that's going to remind you, no, this is an art film.
Yes.
And somehow by the end, you might feel a little exhausted, but you don't feel swindled.
No. Like I said, I think it's one of those movies that if you're listening to this podcast and if you're listening to this podcast, you probably want, if you haven't already seen it, you'd probably appreciate it. But the other movie, Devin, that I think you were actually the first person to decide that, I think to do this, was this movie called Pig, which came out last year or this year. Is it this year? 2021?
Came out this year. It's a 2021 film.
I forget that we're almost actually at the end of the year. I will speak very upfront, and it's not the movie I thought it was. It's not the movie and it's no fault of the press or the trade. I think I thought it was going to be I think coming off the heels of movies like Mandy and some of the other more current Nicolas Cage films, I thought it was going to be far more bizarre, far more psychedelic, or just, and it's not. There are some very weird aspects to the movie, but it's really just a character study. It's really just sort of what you're so much better than I am at sort of synopsizing or sort of explaining the movie. So I'll let you do it for this film.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I loved about Pig, which by the way was it's the directing debut of Michael Sarnowski, and it's written by Sarnowski and a writer named Vanessa Block. And I've heard a couple of interviews with them. They both actually seem like people that would be really fun to hang out with. But what they've done with Pig, they've cast Nicolas Cage very deliberately, obviously, and Sarnowski's very upfront about Cage being his favorite actor anyways, so it was written specifically for him. And the fact that it was not the movie you thought it was going to be, it was deliberately done that way. It was sold a particular way, and they didn't even have to try very hard. Not that they didn't have to try hard with the movie. The damn movie, they shot it in 20 days in Portland, which is insane for a production schedule, especially with a star. But their entire ambition seemed to be to subvert expectations of its star in particular, and expectations that people have of movie going nowadays. I think when this movie was first released, and before anybody really had any valuable opinions out there on it, it was kind of being thought to be specifically John Wick with a pig.
Yes.
That was kind of the tagline that the movie never gives.
No.
But the marketing seemed to gear towards that, and our expectations of what Cage has become in this is that if you look, like you said, at the last few years of Cage's career, yes, he's had some subdued roles here and there, but really going back to Bad Lieutenant in 2009, there's been like an escalation that got up to the point of Mandy is probably really the peak of it. But you also see elements of it in Mom and Dad. You see elements of it in Color Out of Space.
Exactly.
A lot of what he's been doing lately has just been building up to some sort of rage or insanity. And so people knew, especially since they're giving Cage long hair and a huge beard and like all these scabs all over his face for most of the movie. They knew that the marketing was going to make this look like John Wick with a pig, and that it was building up to Cage going nuts. And so what they did was brilliantly subvert that on every single level. This is not a revenge movie. This is not revenge even in the smallest form. This is a movie about grief.
Yep. Exact 100%.
Yes, you can say like a movie like Mandy, which again, I love Mandy. Mandy is very much a revenge epic. He suffers this loss and he goes crazy and has to right this in the world. With Pig, he's violently beaten and his truffle pig is stolen. And the rest of the movie, he spends looking for his pig and anticipating his grief.
Yep.
And he's a character who's already broken because you very early get the idea that this is somebody who used to be someone to society. Like society used to give a shit about this person. Now he lives alone in the woods outside of Portland, hunting truffles with his truffle smelling pig, and kind of spends his nights contemplating whether he's going to put in a mixtape made by his deceased wife, which we get the feeling very early on is going to be a symbol of closure for him of something. Now, the relationship with his pig, it's never over sentimentalized. It's not like Babe where he and the pig are best buddies.
No, yeah.
The pig waits for him while he's cooking, and the pig sleeps in a pallet next to him. And then there's scenes after the pig is taken and he's looking for clues as to who has his pig. And he goes to other truffle hunters in his forest who are actually very dismissive of him until he says that his pig was taken. And then they're like, motherfucker, let's find out. You get the idea very quickly that for someone who hunts truffles, a pig is very important. So
and that's for the majority of the film, you're led to believe that the reason that he is hunting for this pig is because it's his livelihood, that he's trying to find it because that's what he does. He finds truffles and sells them to he sells them to an intermediary who sells them to fancy restaurants. And you're led to believe that he wants to get his prized, his incredibly gifted truffle sniffing pig, but that's actually not really the reason. And we can get into that later. But as far as what this very simple reason he's doing what he's doing, which you've already there's no reason to be coy. Towards the end of the film, he's talking to Alex Wolff's character, who I think is great in this. Such a perfect counterpoint to Cage's character in this movie. But
yeah, I think they should both be nominated this year, by the way.
I agree. I really like Alex Wolff. I think that kid's got a great career ahead of him, and he's so good in this. And I think a lot of things they did with his character, which made we can get into that in a second too. But I keep trying to not get ahead of myself. But basically, towards the very end of the movie, Alex Wolff's character basically says like, "Oh, it sucks that you can't." When again, I'm trying to navigate spoilers or whatever. But anyways, he just up front asks him like, "Oh, it sucks that you can't. That we can find you another pig or whatever." And Cage's character goes, "It's not about the truffles. I can find truffles. The trees tell you where to find the truffles. Like, I just miss my pig." And it's so like, oh, that he's finally said it. Like he's finally it's like, it's not about, it was just his companion. And it's like, oh, this is so sad.
Yeah.
But it also played very like on, like he's not like, there's nothing melodramatic about it. It's just this honest moment of like, he's like, yeah, I just miss my pig. It's very downplayed, but brilliant. The plot itself sort of goes in some weird directions. At one point, there is like a fight club for restaurant workers, which they never fucking explain.
It's been driving me a little crazy, to be honest.
To the point where I'm like, is this a real thing? I was like, is this like something like?
It's the one part of the plot that I can't completely reconcile in my brain. I know, okay, Cage, everyone knows at this point, Cage is a famous chef who's gone into hiding after his wife passed away. So he is known. His name is known around Portland.
Yeah.
I remember when this first came out, people were like, well, when you find out his real backstory, and it's like, it's kind of partly why I mentioned that we need to ease up on what the world even considers a spoiler. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that we find out very early on that this guy used to be a hot shit chef in Portland. That is not Nicolas Cage is not playing John Wick, is basically the spoiler. That he was not a former assassin who now hunts truffles with his pig.
Yes.
There's a connection. Exactly. There's a reason why he hunts truffles, because it's connected to the profession that he was in before he left. But he comes back into Portland to find who took his pig, and he goes into this literally underground. And apparently there really are underground tunnels all over Portland where the mafia used to do a lot of business.
That's absolute fact.
And they are connected by the restaurants. So it would make sense that there's some sort of an underground thing. The only thing that I've been able to get from interviews and things is that no, there is not really a Fight Club for waiters, but that the reason it was put into the movie was to show that waiters sometimes need a way to relieve the tension of wiping our silly ass mouths all day. Like,
yeah,
these people are
but also
treated
the
like
scene
shit,
itself,
and they go down there and they get into fights in order to like relieve the tension. But what I don't understand is that it's not a fight club in a fight club sort of way. They're paying money just to be, it's almost more like Hostel. It's like they're paying money to beat the shit out of a person. And when he goes in and he writes his name, and it's the big reveal the first time he says his name, and they all recognize it as this chef that went missing, 10, 15 years ago. And then suddenly they all want to kick his ass.
that's what I was going to say. It seems very personal at that point.
I don't understand that part of it. And I think that frankly, I think that might be a fail of the movie. I don't think that's something that I didn't understand because I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
I think that
it could just be as simple as to show that this guy, throughout the entirety of the movie, he is kind of a dickhead where he's very short with people and he's very curt. He's obviously hates humanity enough to basically seclude himself away from it. Even though Alex Wolff's character is kind of a little dickhead, a little douchebag, he's very, dismissive of him and kind of abuses him. So, but I think it's just sort of saying, like, probably when this guy was like a top chef, he probably wasn't the nicest guy and probably wasn't the nicest to his wait staff and the service industry people.
Oh, that's a very good point. They all wanted to kick his ass,
but they couldn't.
Well, when was the last time you saw Gordon Ramsay say something nice to his wait staff? So,
exactly.
Yeah, okay. All right. That makes more sense to me now. I take back what I said about the filmmaker. I was there all along and I didn't get it. I'm just that much of a dick when I get in front of a microphone.
But I think it's the one scene in the movie because it is so outlandish where it's like, wait, what the? I think at that point
it would make sense that the wait staff wants to kick his ass because he was probably really hard on his like sous chefs and
exactly. Probably treated everybody who worked for him the same way he's treated everybody else throughout the movie. But again, like I said, it's the part because it comes in the first third of the movie. It sort of is the start of his journey throughout the rest of the film, where you see that scene, you're like, oh, this is going to be kind of like John Wick meets, Mandy, or just another weirdo.
Building up to it, like, oh, I've been waiting half an hour. Here it is. Yeah.
No. And now he just takes a beating and moves on. But it is the rest of the movie sort of has more of an internal logic where he's sort of going from person to person, sort of trying to get a definitive answer of what happened to his pig. But I think it gives you the anticipation or the idea that this movie's going to go in more directions similar to that in tone, where there's weird, violent, or weird, like what? But no, from then it just kind of just becomes a dude looking for his pig and sort of meeting these like kind of shady restaurant people. But I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily a negative, but I remember thinking like, oh, that's weird that we have this one scene that sort of sticks out like a sore thumb, and then it just again becomes a character study with this sad guy trying to find his pig and the sort of unscrupulous people he meets. But it's still great. I'm blanking on, is it Alan Arkin? Whoever plays, is it Alan Arkin? Who plays the dad?
It's Adam Arkin, Alan Arkin.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. Adam Arkin. Thank you. I was like, I don't call him his dad's name, but I did anyways. But like, he's really like, he plays Wolf's dad, and like he's really good at it. And at first, he's like just a piece of shit. But there's another thing that bothered me. At one point, he's like, he hasn't probably showered in a year. I don't even know how long. He's supposed to be grimy. He's supposed to smell, and then he's gotten beat up and blah blah blah. But there's a scene where he wants to basically convince. I don't even really know how to articulate it in the sense of like, there's a scene where he basically finally cooks a meal for Thomas Wolfe's dad to sort of basically get him to either give him his pig or admit it, because he knows like he's going to cook him this brilliant meal or whatever. And I might be even reading that wrong, but sort of the thing. And like he's making this meal, and he's so like, and again, it's a really well shot film. That all the composition shots, like all the composition of all the cinematography stuff is really well done, and it's really, although the lighting and stuff, the lighting is really important in this film, and I think it's done really well. But he's making this beautiful, delicate meal, and all I can think of is this dude hasn't even washed his fucking hands. This is so disgusting. Like, but but that's a personal thing. But it's definitely, I think we haven't mentioned specifically that every other film, like we've talked about, Nicolas Cage is playing this sort of over the top. All of the roles from, even when he's winning Oscars and playing a serious role, leaving Las Vegas, the performance itself is very kind of large. There's a lot of personality, a lot of character. He was recently in this movie, and I'm blanking on it's basically Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie, but basically
Willy's Wonderland.
Willy's Wonderland. And he doesn't say a fucking thing throughout the whole, doesn't have a single word of dialogue throughout the whole film. And it'd be still an over-the-top performance. It's really bizarre. It's hard to explain, but this is the exact opposite. His character is so internal and so quiet, and it's all through just sort of the presence that, like, when he's on screen, he has a presence, like a desperation, but he's not over the top. He's very subdued. In fact, it's like the character is very quiet, not very verbal, but there's a power to it. And it's like, I thought, like, it's one of those things where I'm not even really, you're sort of getting in the groove of the movie, sort of taking in everything and building the story in your head, and you're not necessarily paying a lot of close attention to the specific details at first, because you're sort of trying to get the gist of what the movie's trying to do. And then 20 minutes in, I'm like, damn, like, this is a very different role for Cage, from the stuff that he's been doing recently, especially things like the ghosts of that newest film. He says it's his craziest movie.
Prisoners of Ghostland,
yeah.
Ghostland.
But it's a different role, but it's still great, and it's still Nicolas Cage. He's still, I thought, and again, without Cage, the movie does nothing. It doesn't even exist. Any other actor in that role, I don't think. I mean, of course, there could be great actors for that role, but specifically, his performance is so.
Well, the fact that it's about cooking is even kind of indicative of how this director did this. Like you said, without Cage, this movie's nothing. But it was also written specifically for Cage.
Yeah.
And it's about a guy who's a master of recipes, right? This movie itself is not the star piece. Like, the plot is not the star of this movie. Like, just the way that, like, you might make something where the truffle is the star of this plate,
Yeah.
Cage is the star of this recipe. You take that element away and everything else collapses. But part of that is because of our idea of what to expect from a Cage movie at this point. Like, Nicolas Cage, it's not even just a matter of age. Cage would not have been able to do this movie 10 years ago, not because he didn't have the talent to do it, but because he didn't have the reputation to subvert what's going on.
That's true. That's very true. That's a good point.
And this director was very astute, knew exactly this was probably written post Mandy, but pre Willy's Wonderland,
Oh, yeah.
The director knew going in, everyone's going to think that it's this, or everyone's going to think that it's John Wick with the pig, which, by the way, I'm going to point out, this is not Cage doing Keanu Reeves. I think that Keanu Reeves in John Wick is doing Nicolas Cage. I think Keanu Reeves at his best is usually somewhere on the Nicolas Cage spectrum, which is not a knock on Reeves or John Wick. I love both of those, the character and the person. But there is a certain way that we expect movies like this to go. In this movie, every step of the way, there's my favorite scene before we even get to the Adam Arkin stuff, and he's still looking for Adam Arkin.
Mm-hmm.
There's this scene where he goes into a really hoity-toity restaurant in Portland. And first off, he makes Alex Wolff's character is named Amir, and he's like his driver because, of course, Nicolas Cage doesn't have a way of getting around. And Amir is asked to get a reservation. Or was he the one that was asked to get a reservation? Or did he get beat up to get the reservation? I can't remember now.
So he got beat up to get the information, and then he forced Amir to basically call, because he knew his dad had an inn there and he didn't want to use that inn, but he did it anyways and sort of pressured them to get an invitation to this very fancy restaurant.
So it shows, though, right there. Yes, you're seeing him be all Nicolas Cagey about, like, no, you need to get a reservation. And he's like, you can't get a reservation. You'll be waiting 5 years to get a reservation. No, you're going to get me in. The filmmakers are already telling you right now, this guy's not going to come and kick in the back door of this restaurant. He's going to come in the front door and they're going to expect him. And he walks into this fancy restaurant after he's already had the shit kicked out of him. And it's a very deliberate choice on a character or on a filmmaking level to have not had him wash up before he goes in. Because now on top of just being the unkept mountain man, he's bruised, he's bloody, he's got like his beard is stained from a nosebleed. Like he just looks awful. And I think the reason why he wants to walk in the front door is because we're trying to show the world that he exists in. And in this hoity-toity place, not a single person, they notice he's weird. They notice he's bloody. No one says anything to him. No one asks if he needs help. Almost as if it would be rude to mention it to this guy who's clearly in pain. Like, mind your own business, sit here, eat your food. That's his problem.
Yeah.
And he comes in and he gets served this weird foo-foo thing where it's clearly like a deconstructed something or other, you know, like, what do they call it? Gastro something. It's gastro science. Like,
good gastronomy. Is it gastronomy?
I'm not sure.
But yeah, like, yeah, exactly. Like
food made by
mixture
science.
of science and cooking.
Yes, where it's whatever this scallop thing is, it's being served under a dome that's had like smoke puffed into it. And then, you know, it's just fancy ass shit. And it does not look in any way appetizing. And he asks to see the chef, and they act like, okay, yeah, I'll go get the chef, because this is something that happens in nice restaurants. But they're a little concerned that this crazy looking guy is asking to see the chef. And they bring out the chef. And once again, just like the fight scene, just like the Adam Arkin scene that's coming later, there's this rising tension of, oh, here it is. Here's John Wick with the pig. Like, we're getting to that point now. Something violent's going to happen to this guy. I just know it. And instead, Nicolas Cage sets the chef down and then like eviscerates him verbally for not following his dream and making this shitty ass pretentious food for all of these people who do not care for him and do not care for anybody, which only further proves, you know, like the blood all over his face and nobody says anything to him. And this chef, who you find out that within this conversation, this hoity-toity chef used to work for Nick Cage's Rob character as an assistant at some point and got fired very quickly. But Cage remembers a dish that he made him once. What was it? It was a stew or something very simple, very earthy. Yeah. And he says, you made that for me once before you were fired because you sucked. He's like making sure to let him know that he got the firing was justified, but you made me this stew once that was perfect. And I don't see that on your menu. And I have to wonder, you know, with what you're putting in front of me for all of these people, it's not food, it's a show. And are you satisfied with yourself? And the whole thing, it's so uncomfortable, but God, it's beautiful. And the look on this actor's face, I had to write it down. His name is David Nell. He's that guy. I've seen him in a million things.
A lot of early 80s movies and stuff like that. But yeah, I actually told my wife, like, he's so perfect that like he felt like one of those he felt like a real, you know, 5-star Michelin chef. Like he looked like it. His like manner, like I was just like, I totally believe this guy is really this character. So, and
he's sitting there smiling at Nicolas Cage the whole time with kind of this weird looking smile that I can't quite describe. But it's similar to like that shit-eating smile that, you know, I don't know how many of you out there worked retail or any kind of customer service, but when someone asks for the manager, and some of us know the feeling of watching the manager come in, and some of us know the feeling of being the manager and having to come in that situation, but there's a certain shit-eating grin that comes from that kind of a position of nodding and smiling and knowing that this person's a little bit crazy and hoping that this person does not escalate to potentially violence or whatever. Like, he's got that customer service grin of, I'm just going to keep on smiling through all of this. But in his eyes, he is like having his heart squeezed.
Yeah.
Because everything Nicolas Cage is saying to him is true about why don't you cook what you like? Why are you doing this for them? Who cares about this food that has fake smoke in a dome around it? Like, who are you trying to impress? These people will never help you. They're not here for you. They don't care. Do something that's true to yourself and be happy. And he's just nodding and smiling, but God, his eyes just look like his soul has died.
It is molecular gastronomy, the scientific discipline concerned with the physical and chemical transformations that occur when cooking. So,
okay. But there was something satisfying on a personal level watching this movie and seeing this chef kind of taken down that many notches by someone who actually knew what he was doing, and who knew him personally before he was doing this. I don't know. That scene just really hit me in a real way, and it actually, I think I related to that chef on a certain level, even though I don't cook.
And I mean, also, there's it's got to be complex because there's so much nuance in that scene, because first of all, you have this guy who's the hot shot of Portland. Like his restaurant is the one that you can't get into. And he's seeing this guy that used to be the biggest hot shot or this legend walk in, and he's fucking beat to hell. He's like, obviously, he's fallen from the grace that, most people in the, that level of cooking would say he's fallen from grace. He's like pretty much destitute, living in the woods. So he sees this guy not only used to be on his level, but they have this history together. And there's got to be a thing of him where it is nice to see him. He probably still has as some kind of artist who may or may not have sold his soul at that point, but somebody who probably at some point wanted to be a brilliant chef that made amazing food and was, respected by his peers. He probably still holds Robin. I think is the full name, but which I always notice when characters named Robin for multiple reasons we won't get into, but he's like, he probably still looks up to him, and despite their complicated past, he probably is still like, it is probably good to see him for a moment. He probably does still hold him in a high regard and a high esteem, but there is probably that thing of like, oh, look where you are, look where I am. Oh, isn't that funny? You fired me, blah, blah, blah. But so there's probably all these underlying things that go. I have to point this out because while the movie's not perfect, I do like it. There's so many nuances and so many layers that I think are the product of really intelligent writing. Amir, the Alice Wolf's character, the first time he shows up, I don't know what kind of car it is, but some very garish, very expensive sports car, like very like super show-offy. And he makes a point of like listening to classical music, even to the point where he's like listening to like a radio show about classical music in another scene. And at first I had a problem with that. I'm like, that's so like, there's a disconnect there. I'm like, I don't think anybody who'd be really into actually be a fan of classical music would like a car that was so fucking gross and like so like gaudy and so such a poor display of wealth. And then I realized, I'm like, that's the point. He's trying to navigate and create this image of being somebody who is fancy and has taste, but he's not nailing it. He's not like, he's trying to overcompensate because of his father and trying to find his footing. So he has this really ugly sports car some like young TikToker would buy, but he's also trying to be like this man of culture and taste, listening to only classical music. And it's that's smart writing, honestly. That's because a lot of ways you could take it. One, he's driving like, a Bentley, or he's driving a Jaguar or something that's a little more like, old wealth and stuff. But it's just a really interesting dynamic. And I was like, oh yeah, he's just bullshitting. He doesn't really have taste and stuff. Yeah. So
he thinks this fancy ass car is going to make him seem classy, and it's exactly he picked the wrong car to make him seem classy.
Yeah, just because it's expensive doesn't mean it has class. Exactly.
And you see his character grow a lot as he's going through this with
100%.
With Rob, and the idea that like it's not that he likes classical music, it's that he's listening to classical music so that he can hold his own in a conversation in the rooms where his dad. Like these are truffle people, which is just an indicator of fancy. So yeah, he's compensating emotionally, or he's trying to show off. And you start to find out some things about him and his relationship with his father and their mutual loss as well. And you start to realize again, when Adam Arkin's character pops up, you're like, okay, now the movie has a big bad. Like we finally got up enough levels. When's the fighting going to happen? Yep. No, it's not going to happen with the big bad. Yes, he's the big bad. Yes, he's the one who has the answers to what happened to the pig. And yes, he actually does seem like he's a man capable of violence, and he's a dangerous person. He's already had Nicolas Cage beat up and his pig stolen. Spoiler. But although by the time you get to him, like, that there's no reason to go further in trying to investigate what happened. But at the same time, what ends up happening, and this is the big spoiler. Okay. So anyone that doesn't want to hear anything about the end of Pig, I hope you enjoyed the last hour and a half we've given you. But now's the time to turn back, because when we get to the big bad moment, what happens is actually very emotional. Now, there was a scene earlier in the film where Amir is talking about the one time he saw his parents happy. His mom's now in a coma or something, and she's hooked to machines, and he just wants her to die peacefully with whatever dignity she has left. And Adam Arkin's character is selfishly keeping her alive, but also because he's emotionally not ready to let her go. So yes, even the big bad has some like really emotional things going on in this film. But Amir is talking to Rob about this one time where his mom and dad were getting along and they went out to eat, and they came back from the restaurant and they would not shut up about what they ate. It was the most wonderful thing. It was the most wonderful restaurant experience they've ever had. And it really doesn't take a whole lot to like link it together that Rob was the chef for them that night. But when it comes down to Arkin's moment where you think Cage is coming around to like kick his ass or find his pig finally, or whatever it is at this point you might have an expectation of, he breaks into the house and recreates the dinner that he had with his wife. And it's the most spectacular show of kindness to an enemy that I have ever seen, or that I've seen in a very long time in a film. And he's teaching Amir how to make this meal, almost like, I'm teaching you, you always want to please your dad. That's why you drive a fancy ass car. That's why he's not explaining these things to him explicitly, but what he's doing is he's showing Amir how to make this meal. If you want to impress your dad, you recreate for him the meal that made him love your mother. And it's so non-confrontational and it's so beautiful. And Arkin comes into the scene like, what's this? You made me dinner? Okay. And he sits down. Okay, let's do this. And Arkin starts eating, and there's no dialogue. It's very awkward, but it's like everybody, just kind of wants to see, well, what's going to happen next? And he sits down and he starts eating. And then he runs away crying. The taste of the food is so powerful that Arkin cannot eat anymore and is reduced to being basically a sobbing child by the sense memory that this person's meal brought to him. And it's at that point, I guess I won't give too much away beyond this, but it's at that point that he breaks down and explains to Rob, Nicolas Cage, the answers that he's been looking for concerning his pig. And he doesn't give it up. Like, he gives it up in a way like, fine, you win. I'll tell you everything you want to know. But he did it without a single punch. He did it without a single snarky kick-ass line. He did it by fixing him the meal that he remembered with his wife. It's the power of that. I don't know. I'm going to spend years processing that.
Plus, I also want to point out too, it's not even like, his father is emotionally, he's in tears or whatever. And like, it's all throughout the film, he's like, dude, my dad, you don't understand, my dad's like super power. Like, even his dad comes off as almost like a fucking gangster. And he's very like, he's like this,
he's like a gangster chef.
Yeah.
Which you sort of believe because you know that the sous chefs and the waiters have a fight club.
Exactly. But he has this, it's to his dad, it's about like, I don't lose. Like, you're not getting your pig back because you can't force me to give you your pig back. But at the end, all of that is gone. And he's like, legitimately, emotionally, he's like, I really wish I could give you your pig back. Like, there's like, it's all of that.
Completely humbled.
He's humbled and, grateful. And he's just dropped all of that, the facade of being this gangster, this culinary world gangster or whatever. And it's really like interesting because, again, it goes against so against what your expectations are. You think he's going to be more of like, that's the thing is, well, the film, I don't know how many times I will rewatch the film. I don't know if there's enough meat on the bones for it to be a movie I watch constantly or watch over and over again, but it's definitely a film I will probably revisit at some point.
I'm going to own it because I'll tell you why. I'm going to buy this one because I feel like this is the type of thing that won't always be available on your streaming services.
That's the thing. I mean, I even buy movies that I don't even really, I don't love. I know half the things I buy, like things like Vinegar Syndrome, are literally just a fucking crapshoot, like a roll of the dice on whether or not it's even going to be worthwhile. But because of that, because some obscure movies finally getting released, that's a whole other topic. But the thing I was going to say is, I really look forward to the future films. It's sort of like Mandy's a perfect example, because I watched Pasmos Cosmatos' first film, something Black Rainbow. God damn it, what is
Black
it?
Rainbow, I think, is it. It's got Rainbow in the title.
But yes, exactly. I watched his first film, and even though it didn't blow me away, even though I thought it was a little laborious to get through, and the movie definitely had problems, I thought there was enough. I not just I want to see more. I expect great things from this person, because you can see it. There's something there. I felt that way. I remember seeing Valhalla Rising and thinking like, Nicholas Winding Refn. I'm like, I need to see what this guy's going to do, because there's something so original about this, even though it's not. And people shit all over Nicholas Winding Refn. I get it, but his first 3 movies, everybody I know hates Only God Forgives. I think it's fucking absolutely brilliant from start to finish. I love everything about it. It's fine if people don't, but I like it. But Neon Demon stuff, we can get into conversations there. But what I'm saying is, you see that first movie or an early film, doesn't have to be the first, you can see second, or like just an early film from either writer, director, or combination. And even if you don't think that this work is brilliant, that they're finding their footing and they're very capable of doing something fantastic. So I really look forward to future works by these filmmakers, because there's enough intelligence, there's enough originality that like I really want to see what they do now.
Exactly. What else do I love? Will they subvert? Like,
exactly.
Will they dissect? Will they it's what's the term? In cooking, it's like a deconstructed chocolate cake.
Exactly.
This is a deconstructed action movie. This is an action movie that has had all of its guts ripped out and it's been turned inside out to just show the nerves.
It's a Charles Bronson film without any of the Charles Bronsoniness.
Exactly. I love it for that. I completely love it for that. And I get why people act a little like that's spoiling it to tell people that it's going to subvert that. But I honestly don't know how you can have more than a 3-minute conversation about Pig without giving so much of this away.
No, and I think it's one of those things where it's like it's a journey film, because I feel like it's one of those films where the less you know, I mean, I think all films, the less you know, kind of the better. Rarely is that not the case, where it's better to go into a movie with no expectations. So whatever you're reacting to is a very honest reaction. It's not hitting the wall of what you expected it to be or wanting it to be even. But I think this movie specifically is just, it's going to go in directions that you just don't expect. And it's going to keep doing that, but not in a way that's like, oh, these crazy left turns. No, it's sort of serpentine. Like it's doing its own thing, but everywhere it's going is it's going to interesting places and with great performances and stuff. But I think I want to parrot what you said. I think Cage was phenomenal in this, and I think Alex Wolff is also fucking great in it. And he really is. He's doing the bulk of the exposition when needed in a lot of times. Yeah. And he's playing. He's basically playing the exact opposite character to Cage. He's such a foil to Cage. Everything that Cage is as a human being, as a character, as a work of fiction, mirrors the exact opposite, in almost every way. And it's interesting, because that could also come off cartoonish and flat and stuff. But I think Alex Wolff is a strong enough young actor that I think he did really well with it. And I think I gotta say I like these double features. I think specifically because we've chosen so far really good films to sort of play off each other, new film, old film. But I think this one might be kind of hard to top, especially for newer, if like we're including a newer film and an older film, because this one, like both films are so unique and so different. So but I look forward to whatever the next one is. I mean, I really like these because we get to really get our finger, as again I was trying to, like, for the sake of our audience, I know when we talked about the origins of doing these episodes that we want to have a more digestible sized episode for our listeners, so it's not a fucking it's not a Godfather film, it's not the extended cut of the Lord of the Rings. Like, it's a much more digestible size, but I think this is a good length, but again, I like the fact that we can really deep dive. And you, again, every time I do this, you always give me incredible insights and stuff that I didn't think about, and then nuggets of production stories and stuff. So I always really enjoy these. So I think we I love the deep dives in the years and deep dives into specific actors and filmmakers and that whatever. But I like these because I just really enjoy these kind of episodes. So anyway, that's my final point I will make for tonight.
Yeah, I like them too. I'll be honest. I if people want to listen to the longer ones, they can. It's if they want to shut them off halfway through, that's fine too. Like, to me, the idea of doing the double features is just to cut back on our time doing the research.
That's true.
So I'm hoping that if anybody is still listening to us right now, they're listening to us because they enjoy us and that we're still good 2 hours in. I'm hoping, knock on wood. If nobody's listening, I'm still going to keep talking though.
I mean, yeah, this is for you and I. I mean,
but I like that we can focus on just one thing and really get as many of our thoughts out about one thing as we can, because I think when we're going through the deep dives, we are moving from one film to the next, and inevitably even these I look back and go, oh, I forgot to mention this, which is just in my nature. That's just who I am. I will always intentionally leave something out.
I feel like that's why at this point I feel like I don't. Not only do I not need to do a ton of research, I feel like I shouldn't, because I feel like you're going to be so exhaustive in yours. Like, I think my reaction to some of your research is probably, it's the fun part. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's annoying. But I think ultimately, I think you and I look at films very similarly in the sense of like we connect to it, on a personal level, emotional level, analytical level, but I think you and I love to get, some people like to talk about the real mechanics of film, which I like too. Talk about like, sound editing and, sound design and scores and all that stuff and all those interesting topics. But what really excites me is the stories and the characters, and really getting into like, why did the filmmakers make this, and, how did it turn out? But anyways, we can talk philosophical about film all we want. But my last point, my true last point, Devin, is I love doing these with you, and hopefully we can get back on more of a track. I apologize that everything. I can't have a month right now that's not something, frustrating or crazy or hectic in my life. So, but I look forward to our next one specifically. We won't talk about it, but I'm excited about our next episode. We'll keep it as a surprise right now, unless you want to talk about it. But,
I think we can let people know that, hey, there's something we're excited about.
That's right.
So maybe you can start getting a little excited too.
A couple firsts for us.
Yes, absolutely. We're looking forward to it, and that is, I'll give away this much, that is specifically tied into Halloween, and that will be our Halloween episode. So there will at least be one other episode in October, I promise.
Absolutely, we promise.
So we've got something very big for you guys for Halloween. We'll leave it at that. Until the ghosts and goblins are knocking on our door, don't start the Golden Shamrock theme song too soon, because it's a rough song to have stuck in your head for an entire month. And
it's only October 3rd when we're recording this, and I've literally already had it stuck in my head.
Silver Shamrock. Did I say Golden Shamrock? Silver
you
Shamrock.
Did.
Silver
Golden
Shamrock.
Showers. What did you say? Silver Shamrock.
Silver Shamrock. So. All right.
My favorite thing, I'll tell you this real quick. It did my heart proud. I recently went to Texas Frightmare weekend.
Oh yeah, I wanted to hear about that.
In Dallas Fort Worth, and as soon as we got in, we were looking around, and a line was literally 3/4 of the entire, 3 of the 4 walls, basically, in this big show meeting room or whatever, blanking on the term, in this big high hotel where the convention was taking place. Walking around this big convention floor, 3 of the 4 walls had a line, and we basically traced it around, and the however many people, 70 people in line or whatever, were all there to get Tom Atkins' autograph, and made my heart. In fact, I had a joke though.
It thrilled you?
It thrilled me. That because we were talking on the bus, we had to take a shuttle from the hotel over, because it's not an ideal situation. If I'm gonna go next year, I'm gonna stay at the Hyatt where it takes place, because it's literally, attached to the airport. It's not like outside the airport. You have to literally go in. Anyways, it's a whole thing. But when, we're talking about like, we were on the show over there. I'm like, because, we're in a pandemic. People are wearing masks, and so it's like you're seeing celebrities, but I'm like, and I was like, is it really, if I can't see the mustache, is it really Tom Atkins? Like, how do I know? You know what I'm saying? So, but anyways, he was there and he looked honestly tickled pink. I will say, he has definitely gotten, even in the 4 years since I got the last time I was able to meet him, he's already looking a little older. So God bless him. I'm happy he's still kicking around. If you get a chance to meet Tom Atkins, it will not disappoint, though. I promise. He is a character and a half. So
yeah, he's fantastic. Just to throw my own 2 cents on Tom Atkins here before we sign off. One of the last big things I did before the pandemic hit, and it was a few months ahead. I really don't do big things that often, but I met up with our mutual friend Casey. He invited me out to see Tom Atkins at a Tom Atkins triple feature at the Egyptian Theater. It was Night of the Creeps, of course, Halloween 3, and The Fog. And then
that's triple feature.
Yeah, it was pretty great. And Atkins came out at the end of the showings to do a Q&A. And before he came out, they handed out to the entire audience Tom Atkins masks. They were just Tom Atkins' face cut out and stapled to a popsicle stick, basically. But the whole idea was that when he came out, it was a practical joke we were all part of. When they sent Tom Atkins out on the stage, he walked out to a room full of Tom Atkins. So
I love it.
But I've kept my Tom Atkins mask. I've got that. That's going to go on a wall someday. That's
I have a Tom Atkins shirt, but I don't have a Tom Atkins mask. So I'm pretty just. We'll end on this. I have to tell you my story of meeting him real quick. So we were in line to meet him, and the couple in front of us, they were like a couple of big horror nerds, and they had made him a box, basically like almost like a big jewelry box, but it was just decoupage with pictures of Tom Atkins. And if you opened the box, it had pictures of Tom Atkins and stuff relevant to Tom Atkins, whatever. But we're watching them talk, and he's like, "Oh, it's amazing, whatever." And they get everything signed that they're going to get signed. They move on, and we go up. He's like, we approach him. He's like, "Did you see that shit? Ugh, creepy." And I was like, "You are exactly who I wanted you to be."
Yes, so, I want him to be that person too. I've actually written parts for Tom Atkins, so I'm hoping that I get that lucky someday.
Let's get that rolling. Yeah, let's get that done before it's too late.
Yes. All right, James. Well, I will hold off on saying Happy Halloween just yet because we will definitely be back before then, and I'm greatly looking forward to this.
I'm going to throw this challenge out there with the full admission that a lot of times these get postponed because of me. I would like to do 2 more episodes for Halloween in the season. Maybe we can do a little, like, besides this extra special next one we're doing, maybe we could do a short one as well. I think like Halloween
I am down.
All right, let's we won't promise it, but we will try. How about that?
Let's give everybody some candy here.
That's right.
Because we're so sweet.
We're going to give them treats, but then we're going to trick them because there won't be an episode.
Yeah, I said because we're so sweet, but really I should just say we're so nutty.
That's right. Nougaty. Right. I'm nougaty. You're nutty. But bump. Anyways.
Oh, that was pretty good. Yeah. Way to end the show on da 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 da. Da.
I could end it on 6 more days till Halloween. 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 6 more days till Halloween. Silver Shamrock.
All right. Now you were all cursed too in the audience. Enjoy your October. You'll hear from us soon. Bye,
Peace.
James.
Later, Devin.